Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just jump right in, because today we're taking a really incredible journey into the architecture of your own anatomy. We're going to look at exactly how the human body protects its most vital, dynamic, constantly moving organs. It's kind of like your body is a set of anatomical Matryoshka dolls. You know, the nesting dolls? To understand how your most crucial organ actually functions, we can't just look at the surface. We have to open it up, layer after layer after layer. So let me ask you something that seems pretty basic. Where exactly does your heart live? Now, if you just pointed to your chest, well, you're not wrong, but you're really only scratching the surface. To truly answer that, we have to zoom way past the skin, past the heavy skeletal protection of the rib cage and the sternum, and dive incredibly deep into the body's hidden, fluid-filled spaces. Because honestly, your heart doesn't just hand out loosely in your chest. It's actually locked inside this highly specialized, meticulously engineered vault. So, popping open our first nesting doll, we find the ventral cavity. Based on our source material, this is the massive compartment located at the anterior or the front of your body. This is where your most vital viscera, your internal organs, live. But why does this massive cavity even exist in the first place? Like, why aren't our organs just packed in tight like sardines? Well, it's because the ventral cavity allows for some really massive changes in the size and shape of these organs. Think about it. Your stomach expands when you eat, your lungs inflate with every breath, and your heart violently contracts every single second. This giant space ensures these organs can move and shift without totally distorting the tissues around them. Okay, so how is this cavity actually structured? The ventral cavity is actually a duplex. It's divided into two totally distinct levels. On the top floor, we've got the thoracic cavity, the upper chest. And down on the bottom floor, we have the abdominopelvic cavity, which houses all your digestive and reproductive stuff. And serving as the physical floor dividing these two spaces, that's your diaphragm, a tough, dome-shaped respiratory muscle. But for our journey to the heart today, we're taking the elevator straight up to the top level, the thoracic penthouse. All right, now that we're inside the thoracic cavity, safely behind the tough bones of the rib cage, what do we actually find? Well, it is a crowded, super high-rent district. You've got the lungs, the heart, the trachea, the esophagus, and these massive major blood vessels all sharing the same space. And remember, this environment is totally dynamic. The lungs are constantly expanding and deflating. The heart is just vigorously beating. It is a zone of nonstop motion. That means the body has to be unbelievably clever about how it organizes these structures, or else they'd literally rub each other raw. And the way the body solves that crowding issue is just fascinating. Opening our next nesting doll, we enter the mediastinum. If the thoracic cavity is a big city, the mediastinum is a highly specialized central neighborhood located squarely between the two lungs. This is the ultimate structural anchor point. It's where the trachea, esophagus, and several of those major blood vessels run. But most importantly for us, it is the exact geographical region where the heart is safely anchored in place. Which brings us to the next layer down, nestled deep inside that mediastinum neighborhood, the pericardial cavity. This is the main event. Shielded from all the chaos of the larger thoracic cavity we just explored, this is the heart's private VIP suite. It's a highly specialized, tightly sealed, completely fluid-filled space designed for one purpose, and literally one purpose only, to safely house the human heart. But how does this cavity actually wrap around the heart to protect it? Well, to understand that, we need to look at this incredible piece of biological engineering called a serous membrane, or serous. You can think of this as the body's own biological bubble wrap. A serous membrane is this super thin, double-layered structure made out of epithelial and connective tissue. Its number one job? To secrete a slippery, lubricating liquid called serous fluid. Because organs like the heart and lungs are constantly in motion, this membrane and its fluid act as a critical friction reducer. It keeps the viscera from rubbing against the cavity walls and causing severe, agonizing inflammation. To really visualize exactly how that double membrane works, our sources use this absolutely fantastic analogy. I love this. Imagine pushing your fist into an underinflated balloon. In this scenario, your fist is the heart. As you push it into the balloon, the rubber folds over itself, right? It creates two distinct layers. The inner layer of the balloon that's directly touching your fist, that represents the visceral pericardium, the layer covering the organ itself. The outer layer of the balloon represents the parietal pericardium, which lines the cavity wall. And the air trapped inside the balloon, that represents the thin, fluid-filled space of the pericardial cavity itself. Simple, but literally how it works. So the crucial takeaway here is how these specific layers function together as a unified system. On the very outside, you had the fibrous pericardium. This is a tough, dense layer that anchors the heart so it doesn't just bounce around in your chest when you jump. Inside that is your serous pericardium, that double-layered balloon we just talked about. And sandwiched right between those two serous layers is the pericardial fluid. This fluid is the ultimate biological shock absorber. Guys, your heart beats roughly 100,000 times a day. Without that thin layer of slippery liquid, the constant friction would trigger massive, life-threatening inflammation in just a matter of hours.
But here is the stark clinical reality of all this. This intricate, anatomical Matryoshka doll is a perfectly, delicately balanced environment. The exact volume of fluid inside that cavity is precisely calibrated. When everything is healthy, it works flawlessly. But because this space is so tightly sealed and fibrous, things can go absolutely disastrously wrong if those fluid levels change even the tiniest bit.
And that brings us to a really serious condition known as pericardial effusion. This happens when there's an abnormal buildup of extra fluid inside that pericardial cavity. Remember how tough that outer fibrous layer is? Because it can't easily stretch, that extra fluid essentially has nowhere to go. So it immediately cranks up the pressure inside the cavity, basically squeezing the heart from the outside in. Patients usually present with angina, which is severe chest pain, and dyspnea, or extreme shortness of breath. If the pressure gets too high, it leads to cardiac tamponade. That's a terrifying condition where the heart is squeezed so tightly it's physically blocked from pumping blood. The very sweet design to protect the heart essentially becomes a deadly trap. Which leaves us with this final kind of mind-blowing thought to ponder. We've just zoomed way past the ribcage, into the ventral cavity, up into the thoracic penthouse, into the mediastinum neighborhood, and finally into the fluid-filled pericardial suite of the heart. We've seen exactly how perfectly engineered it is and how terrifyingly quickly a slight excess of fluid can threaten your life. So, if the heart's tiny fluid sac holds that much power over your survival, how delicately balanced do you think the rest of the fluid-filled spaces, like the ones protecting your lungs and your very brain, are keeping you alive right at this exact second? It really makes you stop and marvel at the interconnected, fragile, but deeply resilient nature of our own internal anatomy.